Okay,
Let's go.
guys. Okay,
Yep.
guys. So let me start first introductional talk, and then I'll go into the details. As I mentioned, my experience started from IntelliJ IDEA with Cursive plugin. Then I switched to Emacs, but not as a regular Emacs, but terminal-based Space Max. That was a nightmare period of my Clojure experience. And then I tried to found out the usable and convenient editor and plugin for using with Clojure. I found out the VS Code, the very nice text editor, and IDE actually, which I like, and I use the regular plugins for it during several years, but finally I found out that I was not satisfied with them, and I tried to find the way how can I programming with Clojure in a, in a convenient manner, in a usable manner, with plugins and with tools which I like. And for example, while we are talking about Visual Studio Code for now, I'll continue to share you some tools for this environment. But I want to mention that about a half of these tools are editor agnostic. So they will work even in Emacs, in IntelliJ. So they was not based on editor or relies on some IDE properties. So they are common and may be used with any editor and any terminal. So first of all, maybe the first question, I have a little plan for my today's speech. And first of all, I want to start from the maybe the first question you may ask me. Why not use the common solution, the existing solution, which are very popular, very wide used, and created for community? I mean, Calva, Clojure, and some other Clojure-related plugins for Visual Studio Code. About Calva, I have a very good relations with Calva maintainer, but I may show you some tricky points, some issues from my side to Calva. Because of them, I decided not to use it in my work and in my pet projects. Maybe let's show you install Calva first. Yeah, install. Okay. Should it be restarted or not? Looks like not. Terminal. Yeah, thread sleep, different colors. Yeah, I installed Calva. And let me show you. I have some parameters here for trailing white spaces. Trailing. Yeah, show trailing white spaces, render, and trim trailing white spaces on editor save. That means if I type some white spaces here, you may see dots, which represents the white spaces on each line. But I have a setting, trim trailing white spaces on file save. But with Calva enabled and switched on, when I save the file, you may see my file with a black dot on the top. It's not saved yet. And if I save it, yeah, the white spaces are still here. Again, let me type another ones and save the file. Oh, yeah, they are still here. But when I disable, or maybe even delete Calva, oh, it needs to be reloaded. Yeah, I'll reload the editor. Let's wait a few seconds. Yeah, trailing white spaces is still here, but Calva is deleted now. And I add some extra white space and save file, and there it disappears. So that's the only one issue with Calva. There are several another ones, but as I mentioned, maybe I'd better stop sharing some Calva issues. Just was for only one purpose, just to show you some reasons why I decided to not use Calva, Clojure, Chlorine, and other Clojure plugins, because I have some issues for them. So then, while we decide not to use existing solutions, then we have only one way, bare bonus way. So I call it bare bonus because it's quite simple and quite straightforward. Which way can we use? First of all, we have, as you see in the window below, Visual Studio Code has its own integrated terminal, and we may do a little research what we can achieve without any plugins, just with raw Visual Studio Code and raw its internal integrated terminal. So let's type lane REPL. Let's start a REPL in terminal. Yep, it started and shows the prompt. And Visual Studio Code has already built-in commands for using this terminal. First of all, it can select form to the nearest bracket. For example, this one row form, but I also can select it. Or I may select even a bigger form. There is a special hotkey I attached with this command, but this is already built integrated command into Visual Studio Code. Select to the nearest bracket. So if I start here, it selects internal form. If I start here, it selects external form. If I start even here, it selects all the form. Or maybe this one, yeah? And then we have another command, run selection to terminal. So if it's one row, we may even not select it. We may run it immediately in terminal. I press a hotkey, and you see in terminal +1, 2, 3, and result 6. And maybe here I select a row, run it in terminal, unable to resolve symbol A. And if we define symbol A, yep, def A, and then A is 33. And if we met multiple rows forms, we may select it and then run it to terminal. You print, thread sleep 2 seconds, and then print. And looks like everything's fine. We may communicate between Visual Studio Code and its terminal from the Clojure language, from the Clojure namespace, from the Clojure code, without any plugins. And it was a core of of my research then, and it was very nice feature of Visual Studio itself. So we may not use any in-REPL, any socket REPL, any REPL integrated parts. You see, in-REPL server start on port blah 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 44661, but we are not using any in-REPL, any other approach here. Yeah, but it's a very limited thing we found out. Because, for example, first of all, if we will evaluate big forms, first we have a not readable echo with new line signs and so on. Second thing, the result is not formatted, is not highlighted, and is not quite readable, as for me. And the third thing, if we are trying to evaluate such unlimited, for example, lazy collections range, it will block the terminal, and I have to finish the terminal because it blocks. Then I create another terminal, and first tool I may introduce you is just for improving the terminal itself. It's not a VS Code related tool. It's not any other editor related tool. I mean that the Clojure tools has a batch of tools for using in terminal. First of all, I may introduce you Whitby. I have already integrated. Sorry, looks like I.
Sorry, I think the screen share crashed. I think you can try
Yeah.
resharing.
Let me. Looks like. Sorry, guys, just wait a little bit. Looks like my computer is freezed. Okay, guys. Looks
Yep.
like I'm back. Are you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you. We can see you.
Okay,
You can
okay,
share your
nice.
screen first.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. So,
Then you need to turn on your nice. You can see you and your
yeah,
screen. Yep.
just several minutes ago, you seen why it's not a good idea to use raw terminal without any additional tools. Yes, just it suspends your system while trying to evaluate infinite lazy sequences and so on. So that's why I may introduce you some terminal plugins. It calls Whitby. And I start my REPL now with Whitby profile. It's a special plugin. I may show you maybe here. It allows some settings about sorting keys in when map representing map delimiter and so on and so forth, some color scheme for it. And finally, it allows us for seeing in results in terminal in more smart manner. For example, 6 is now highlighted as a light brown color. Some exceptions, yes, they are still black, but maybe for this complex keys. Yeah, my echo is still not very readable, not very pretty, but the result is already much better. It has highlighting, strings are green, keywords are brown, and so on. And even evaluating of range, it limits by 10 elements, but this value of 10 is also maybe passed as a parameter, sequence limit number of tens. So first of all, we may add in any our environment. I mean, even with Emacs, even with IDE, even with Visual Studio Code, we may add some terminal plugins. I choose Whitby. You may choose another ones just for pretty printing and limiting infinite sequences. Anyway, it's quite usable plugin for terminal. You may also find out there are different terminal plugins, Rebel and some other ones for making the terminal integration better, but I stopped with Whitby and it's quite enough for me in this case. Yes, and second thing, what we may add also. For example, let me show you my extensions part. I may want to show how it's say pretty printed brackets, maybe rainbow brackets they may named. Yes, and there is a plugin for it called Clojure. His author is Nikita Prokopov, and we may enable it. Yeah, and looks. The brackets becomes rainbow, blue one, red one with associated closed one, and also some smart highlights of bracket without associated ones. So is it critical part? I think not, but it helps for better visualization, and we may use it or you may not use it. But I just want to mention that there is a plugin for showing the brackets in a more slight and usable way. The third thing I can show that There is a standalone plugin for VS Code called Clojure Conda. Thanks Borg Dude for creating it, for sharing it. And I may enable it too. And then, why I did it, it immediately shows that I have a problems in this file. Namespace Clojure string is required but not used. And it highlights it at the top. Also, if I have some extra unused bindings, it also highlights it, unused binding and so on. Or even if I type something like not empty, for example, Q, and it also highlights use the idiom seek rather than not empty and blah, blah, blah. So the linter is, from my point of view, it's quite usable tool. And you may have it, it's also editor agnostic. CLG Conda used, as I know, in Emacs plugins, in Visual Studio Code plugins, even inside of Calva. But you can use it standalone if you decided to not use a big framework or plugins such as Calva or maybe Cider and so on. And what else may I need from the point of view of Clojure side plugins? If you prefer structural editing, I mean Parinfer, Paredit, Smart Parents, there are also such type of plugins for Visual Studio Code. They are also standalone and even not Clojure related. They may be used for other Lisps, for common Lisp, for scheme, for scheme dialects. And they are about editing the bracket forms, the S expressions, so-called. You may install it if you prefer them, but I have not used the structural editing during my work, so that's why I decided not to install it. But the main point of the second part of my speech, but not the second, it's about fourth for now, is that there are a bunch of Visual Studio Code plugins, Visual Studio Code tools for helping editing code or visualizing code or maybe doing something else. Clojure, CLG Conda, Parinfer, Paredit, or some other things. So it's for your taste. What you prefer, which plugins you prefer. You might try some, you might disable it then, and it's for you. There are a lot of wide common used plugins. And the third thing maybe we're going to the area of my own ones, of my own tools. For example, I may introduce you my Clojure Data Inspector. Let's stop the REPL with previous profiles and wow, sorry. And for now, I'll start the REPL with two profiles, WIDB, as I talked before, and so-called BB. It's not a babashka, like a common abbreviation. It's my abbreviation for bare bonus. So it means that it's very straightforward and simple additional tools. What it allows me. For example, here I may visualize the result of evaluation. You see the window, it's my own data inspector. It may shows and inspects any Clojure value, even lazy one, even datomic entities, even complex one, or even simple ones like as number 6. You may open it in another window and show it. But for number 6, it's not quite usable. But for example, if you have a complex map, I select the form, I evaluated it in editor, and then, yeah, I see the result here. But I may also inspect it via my inspector. It opens a standalone window where I can inspect all the keys of the maps, all the elements of the vectors, and digging on desired level, nested levels of its structure. And even, for example, I may I may evaluate some HTTP request. First of all, I have to add the HTTP infrastructure. So I select this form, I evaluated it in terminal, yeah, and then I make a HTTP call for Google. You see the result here with Vidby is it's quite pretty printed. It prints maps in a very readable manner. Cookies, we can see nested structure, headers. I think where they are actually, where the headers, maybe below. Yes, it's body, yeah, and so on. But we may also inspect it. I have a hotkey at my inspector, data inspector starts, and you may analyze the entry of of the value, protocol version, cookies. You may collapse any value, expand any value, headers, and it also has nice features such, for example, I may copy any value and paste it into the code. And you have two rows. First row is a path, and the second row is a value. So in my complex value, by the path cookies, one pgr domain, I have a string Google google.com. And also this tool, I call it my data inspector. First of all, it's editor agnostic. It's not a part of Visual Studio Code. It's not a part of Terminal. It may be used with Emacs, with Spacemacs, with any other editor. And how I opened it. For example, I have a file key bindings, and here under the key Control key plus I have a command workbench action send sequence to terminal. Visual Studio Code allows me to send any text to terminal. And actually, I send to terminal this text. Use bb debug inspect, only inspect, and inspect last evaluated value. From the point of view of Visual Studio Code, I send this row into the terminal, and then Clojure REPL answers me with opening a window of my inspector and showing the result. And the other thing I want to mention about it, that Clojure core already has main subname space, and it has its own data inspector, but it looks like it's forbidden and forgotten, and you may try to use it if you wish. Again, Clojure core main inspect or table inspect. Yeah, you may play with it, but I created my own inspector, and it looks like I prefer it more. And after this tool, I may ask you now, what else may I need? Let me stop sharing the screen for now, and you may answer me. What else do I need? What I forget about? What else you may guess that you may wish, you may want in this approach? What do you think? You may answer it in chat and microphone. So for your feedback. What do you think? What's absent? What you may want? What else you may want? Okay, just to help and preventing the pause, I show you my screen sharing again, and I may continue. Yeah, I see my screen. Okay, let me. First of all, when I started using this approach, I found out that I haven't code a formatter. What do I mean? In those previous cases, I show you the REPL evaluation, the selection, the data inspector, even the Vidby plugin, but I can't format the code. But it's very important have an ability to format the code. Because if you doesn't have this ability, you can't program effectively. So that's why I now show you my second part of my plugins, of my tools. It's called BB CLG plugin, and I may enable it here. The last part of of plugins, my own bare bonus CLG. Yep. And about code formatting, I have a hotkey. Yeah, and it formatted this way. Yeah, already discussed Calva and Chlorine, and even CLG FMT has also ability for formatting the code, but from my point of view, they are not very predictable as for me. And I built my formatting more understandable and more predictable. For example, it starts formatting from the first opened bracket, and it doesn't move all the expression to the left side, but it relies on first bracket position. Yeah. So, and maybe I will not speak much more about this formatting tool, but I tried maybe a dozen approach of different implementation of this plugin. I created my own web server in the background. I used InREPL, I used CircuitREPL, I used maybe 5 different approaches for formatting the code, and I found out that the fastest way is to use the compiled binary file with Java GRAL of CLG FMT. And it works very fast, even for big files, even for big forms. You see it blinks for a part of second, and it's already formatted. But all other alternatives do it very slowly. Second thing I may show you is evaluation forms without echo. Before, you see that I can send some forms into the terminal, but there was an echo. And now, yeah, you see ability without echo. For such short forms, it's not very useful, maybe, yeah? But for such big forms, maybe for this one, you see the result? But without an echo, without all this terribly visualized input. And especially if the form is quite big, but the result is quite small, it's also very useful. So I eliminated the echo from the terminal. Second thing, what else? Decorations, yes. Now you see, our plugin has the result highlighted on the right side. 6 def R33 user A plus A33. Well, syntax error with red highlighted. It's also work of my plugin. I also added some decorations to the evaluated value, and it shows and quite readable, as you see now. For the for the case that I can even close the terminal now, not delete the terminal process, not finish the terminal, but close it window. Yep. And works with the Clojure code without the terminal. I send the expressions to the terminal, but they're under the carpet. And you see only the results here. And for small results, you may see it on the decorations. But if you wanted to analyze the result more, you can open my data inspector and analyze the result more. And both tools, Clojure decorations and data inspector, covers all the terminal feedback, covers all the results in terminal. Here you can analyze the complex results. Here and here you can analyze the simple results. And you don't need terminal anymore. But again, let's show it. Let's return it back. And also I add some additional comments to my terminal. As you can see, we are working at user namespace. You can see it by the prompt in terminal. But I added, now we're in sandbox namespace, load file, blah, 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 Clojure sandbox, and in a sandbox namespace. And now we are in current sandbox namespace. That allows me to switch between namespaces, reload them, and so on and so forth. I may also add some key bindings for run tests, Clojure test run tests, and that's also Visual Studio Code built-in approach. We can send any text comment into the terminal, send char sequence. When editor lang is Clojure, we may send this comment, and it immediately runs all the tests. So again, I will not ask you what else may I need, but I can imagine about inline doc strings, about go-to definition, and so on, and other features that may Calva have, and so on. But about doc strings, I want to say that inline doc strings is not covers all the cases. Anyway, I have to go to the clojuredocs.org, or maybe do some checks, because it doesn't cover some corner cases. For example, I have string namespace here, and if I type str blank nil, sorry, we should have question mark here. It returns true. Yeah, it's nice. It doesn't fail on nil. But if we start trim on nil, it throws an exception in Clojure environment. But in Clojure script environment, this works fine, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I mean the doc string, it doesn't cover the corner cases, doesn't cover the behavior on some extra arguments, on nils, on numbers, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I have to analyze and try and check and go to the clojuredocs.org. So that's why inline docstring is not quite usable as for me, as from my point of view. Go to definition. Yeah, my plugin still doesn't have go to definition function. But while I am creator of this tool, I think that when I will need it, I'll add it, and so it's not quite critical for me to add a go-to definition approach. And about debugger, yes, I have a standalone debugger for Clojure code, but I think it's not a good idea to cover the debugger functionality for today's speech. So maybe later, or or as you wish. So yes, I have a debugger. So generally speaking, any tool I may need, I may create it by my own, or found out the existed one, like CLG Condo, Clojure. So that allows me to create my own soup from the maybe batch of ingredients. I have a standalone plugins, Clojure, CLG Condo, my own plugin. I have VidB for the terminal. I even have, for example, word separator settings for Visual Studio Code that allows me such things. For example, if you are in C, in C++, or in other languages, that things are two words, AAA minus BBB, yeah? But in Clojure world, it's not two words with minus between them. It's one word. And if you want to select it, you may select it as one word. By double clicking on left button on the mouse, it selects all as whole word. And it depends on the setting word separators. I excluded minus from the word separators here. So that's all the minor settings, the minor tweaks, and the external little tools allows me to add them for my taste, as I described in the title of my today's speech. And for example, if I doesn't need a Clojure, I may disable it. If I if I'm not so happy with Whitby as a terminal plugin, I may prefer another one, not this one. Yep. So that's maybe that's the final words of today's speech. So you may choose by your own taste which plugins, which tools, which minor extra tools, which gives only one thing but do it well. Yeah. Instead of choosing the common big framework such as Calva, maybe Cursive for IntelliJ IDEA and so on. So making your own environment, making your own working process tools by selecting the little parts, little entities. Yes, it's more robust and it's more usable from my point of view. Maybe that's up for today, and so I may stop sharing the screen, and maybe I might ask, are there some questions, some feedback? What you can say, guys?